Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying!
Yes, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cannon Podcast. I have kicked out Alex for his Gyökeres takes. He has been captured by Bane himself. He is on that airplane, and it is just me and Rohan for another weekly made podcast. No, Alex is away. He's coming back on vacation. He will be joining us very, very soon. But I am here with my friend, my sweet prince, Mr. Rohan Jivan. How are you, good sir?
Oh, very good. Very good. I can't wait for preseason. I'm not going to lie, I'm getting a bit sick of the transfer window in terms of the striker pursuit, the Gyökeres news, the non-stop, incessant, same old story. And I'm like, I just want the football to be back. I don't know about you, George, but I think a lot of people need that summer reset away from Arsenal where you're so invested, and I totally get that, but for me, like, that summer reset in which, you know, you go on holidays, you do other things, etc., but I still want to see some games, not gonna lie. Like, I still miss them, you know, and I felt that even during our worst time under Emery and under the latter stages of Arsenal's reign as well. It's like, I just need it. So yeah
man, no, I need my fix. You know what, it's the worst now in my opinion. So it's now about a month and a half since like there's last games, and we got like the Club World Cup, which I actually did not choose to watch. I was like, I'm not going to do it. I've got so much stuff with the content thing. I need to keep my mind fresh. I'm not going to look into it. But bar like a World Cup or like a Euro Cup, if you're at the point where, you know, the Premier League ends around like, you know what, May 10th, May 12th, around there,
May 10th,
typically. Yeah. And then you got like the Champions League final towards the end. But basically end of May is like when you would say football ends, right? After about a month and a half, I'm done. Okay, like that's enough. Get the freaking footy back on. Like I don't know what to do with my life anymore. You know, it's such an integral part of my life. But we were even just talking kind of off air, maybe something personal. I need to get people's opinions on this. As a soon to be newly married man, there are definitely some challenges that you undergo. One of them is trying to balance this idea of needing your life to happen now. And the only reason that I bring this up is because there's a certain contingent of Arsenal fans, you had just mentioned it, where we're looking at just get the attackers in now, just get them all in now. Yeah. And I don't feel like I've seen any preseason discourse. So for as much as my fiance would love the baby, the house, the car, and the new job in the new city all at once,
I was wondering where you're going.
It doesn't matter.
Chicken, what's he cooking?
I gotta keep you up on your toes. For as much as she might want it, we have to tackle each problem as it comes. So one of the first things is we've got a freaking game against AC Milan on Wednesday, and we're looking at the preseason schedules just in case anybody is not aware. Because guys, we are starting preseason. The boys are all the way in Singapore. We've got AC Milan on Wednesday. Sunday, we've got Newcastle, both in Singapore. Then on Thursday, they head out to Hong Kong for Spurs. Big preseason one. Then they've got Villarreal and Athletic Club at the Emirates for the Emirates Cup on August 6th and August 9th. So we've got a packed schedule there, mate. I mean, you know, you have a look. Like, those aren't easy games. Probably the first thing that comes to mind is there's a lot of fears about the competitiveness and, you know, the idea that you play, I don't know, very difficult teams, let's call it. And that can be a pro, that can be a con. Where do you stand on, you know, the preseason path, how difficult the fixtures need to be, and if it's a pro or a con?
Yeah, this is very interesting because I feel like there's a lot of apprehension when we're talking about these big games, you know, in which there's absolutely no jeopardy whatsoever from a results point of view. But when you're talking about the potential likelihood, the probability of sustaining injuries to key players, I think that's where the worries do come. And I totally get that, and I acknowledge the fact that, you know, in those so-called bigger games against a Newcastle relative to playing a Leyton Orient, an Accrington Stanley, you know, a Barnet back in the day where we used to always play Barnet, the injury likelihood is going to be less in those sorts of games, I would assume, you know. But at the same time, I think to myself, injuries can happen irrespective of the fixture that you're in, right? And that for me is a con for sure. But on the flip side, I actually sit in the camp of, I think in the past, George, and I'd say, you know, the last 3-4 years has been this transition of playing like big, difficult games abroad for better preparation. And I think obviously the main driver for me is the fact that it's the marketing incentives behind it, you know, and I think for me that's where, when we're talking about priorities, I think that's the biggest one. But from a footballing perspective, I feel like when you're able to play these big games in situations where there's no risk whatsoever from a results point of view, it allows you to install different patterns, new tactical ideas that you want to trial out in competitive fixtures, which I think holds more weight than you implementing these sorts of ideas, innovations in games against lesser opposition. It's not really transferable in the games that you're going to be facing in the Premier League, you know. So I think that's a big positive. I think the other positive is the fact that when we're talking about new additions, especially players coming from abroad, I think it gives them a bit of a feel of the game before the actual games commence. You know, I think there's less shock in the system if you give them these opportunities to play in these sorts of games against the Newcastle, against the Spurs. Now, I think the counter argument is the fact that maybe a Newcastle, a Spurs, they're not going to go full throttle in pre-season, and likewise Arsenal won't go full throttle. But I think it still gives you a decent indication of what is to come, you know. And yeah, I just think that, you know, the positives there outweigh the cons because it's just better preparation, and I think given how difficult the Premier League has become in terms of how physical it is, I think it's just we're better equipped in playing these sorts of games. You know, I do think last pre-season was probably our most difficult in terms of the types of teams we faced. But I always also go back to 22-23 where we played Everton, we played Chelsea, you know, abroad, and, you know, we saw what the impact that pre-season had on the first 19 games of the season. So, yeah, I think the pros certainly outweigh the cons.
I think that is very difficult to motivate a footballer coming off vacation.
Yeah.
Just generally speaking, let alone a footballer. Guys, how do you feel when you get back from vacation from your job? Yeah. Be real for a moment. The first week, are you productive?
That week bedding, yeah, you're like just reading emails.
Yeah. And you're just getting your body used to the demands of being at 90%. So for me, though, it becomes very easy to slip back into vacation brain, I call it. So on one hand, I love when there's very competitive fixtures because there's nothing that gets you excited as like a footballer more than facing AC Milan. Like that's a big game, no matter where they are, you know, in terms of their global standing and how they are as a team. Just the name gets you excited, right? And you know, that is half the battle, I think, for these professional athletes, especially in preseason when you're working on things that you don't want to work on. It's the pressing triggers. It's the most intensive downloading of tactical information that you're going to have all season.
Yeah.
It will not be this intense all season. So when you're so on, it almost means like when you get to play, it's actually a break, ironically. But you as a coach don't want that. And that's the mentality that a player will have, right? Like you go into preseason with this idea that, okay, for God's sakes, every day I've got Gabriel Hines not giving me water. And, you know, I'm doing all of these sessions and, you know, I'm trying to understand the new ideas that we want to employ for next season. And I'm taking them on board. I'm learning, I'm trying to employ them and I'm trying to learn them in practice. And then when it gets to the game, Mikel and Gabriel can't stop the session, you know, they're playing. And so there's a level of potential switch off there. And as a coach, you're sitting there and you're like, well, how do I prevent that? How do I keep you switched on so that I can make sure that these ideas work? And there's a part of a coach that's saying, I also just want to see if it works. You know what I mean? And I can't see if you're not going to put your all into it, which is to be expected. People don't want to hear that, but I mean, it's the reality of life. I mean, you come back from vacation, you're not going to be switched on 100%. It's normal. But a coach can't think like that. If he thinks like that, he's behind the 8 ball and he's lost before the season's even started. So from their perspective, it's great. I might have a little bit of a different opinion on the specific thing with Newcastle and Spurs. I don't know how I feel about that right now. I was completely fine with a Chelsea. I'd even be fine with a Manchester United. I find that Newcastle and Spurs are potentially some of the most heated games that we've had in the Premier League, and especially physically, when I look at how difficult those challenges have been. And there's bad blood between those
especially
clubs.
Newcastle.
Yeah. And those are the two that I legitimately worry. I don't normally buy into the whole, do you play tougher teams that they're more likely to injure? No, like the risk for injury is there, by the way, if you play Accrington Stanley. Let's just have it right. You know, the risk of football, every time they get on that pitch, there's a risk. So I don't really tend to love to, you know, inflate that argument. But I can't get away from Newcastle don't like us. Spurs, it doesn't matter if it's a preseason, if it's a kickabout round the park, you play them, it's blood. And every single fan will be on your neck about that. That's the only thing that I don't know if I love, to be honest with you. Because those are two teams that I just don't know if they'll respect that. It will get to a point where, in my opinion at least, there's potential, and there's more potential for people to lose their heads in that kind of a match. I think, like, I love a top 6 fixture in preseason. Like I said, United, bring on Liverpool, bring on City even. I really don't mind. I legitimately think if there was 2 teams that I actually wouldn't want to face in a preseason, it might be Spurs and Newcastle. That's interesting. Broadly. That's interesting. Because I feel they are probably the biggest flare-up potential. I haven't seen our team react to any other team except for Newcastle and the Derby. We don't need, look, the Derby is self-explanatory, right? It really doesn't matter when that's played. It's fireworks, no matter what. Preseason, kickabout in the park, like I said. So that to me is always a no-go. I would not touch that personally, let alone with a new manager in Thomas Frank, who I'm hoping is going to, and his Arsenal bias, is going to control it. But anyways.
You let it slip immediately, didn't he, recently?
Oh, I love it. I love that, man. But yeah, I don't know how you feel. Like, maybe we're at different ends here. I worry about the Newcastle because I have a look and I don't think I've seen our team react emotionally to any other team in world football like they do beyond a potential Spurs derby, and they do with Newcastle. Yeah. Like, it's beyond good football for me. Like, it's gotten nasty. You've got Guimaraes chasing Jorginho with an elbow. You've got consistently people having to be separated for decisions. It's we don't like them and they don't like us. And I don't know how that runs in preseason when people aren't fresh and you're late to challenges, and you're inevitably going to be. I don't think they're going to come with the intent to hurt. I think the potential to be hurt is just a lot higher. Yeah.
I guess it's a case of, like, so we go back to the point that I made about, you know, as you've alluded to it and as I've alluded to it, you step on that pitch, irrespective of who you play, the chance of injury is there. But the probability, I'd say, maybe the probability, and this is where I look at the con, I think is higher in a Newcastle and a Spurs than an Accrington Stanley, you know, in terms of just law of averages. But I think the way I look at it, George, and, you know, we'll get onto it a lot more in depth, but, you know, from a player's perspective, and I'm looking at specific individuals that I'm really intrigued by, I'm really excited by. One of them is Zubimendi, for example. And Zubimendi won't need time to adapt from a positional point of view because he's been educated, he's been brought up within a lot of teams. We're talking about Spain and Real Sociedad, who adopt positional principles. And obviously each team has different ideas, different intentions, but there's also a lot of similarity. And I think Zubimendi, in that regard, won't have any issues. But where I think Zubimendi will, I think, a benefit of a Newcastle and a Spurs in pre-season is that shock that you're alluding to, that fire happens in pre-season to begin with. And then when we go into the Premier League, perhaps that shock won't be as, you know, sudden and as, like, big to him, you know, and that's where I look at it from a new addition coming from a different league. I think that could be a good adaptability for him in those sorts of games. And that's the way I kind of see it. I think, you know, ultimately, a lot of it does boil down to the intent and the fiery nature of the game, where you see the cons. But I think from a perspective of transferable qualities into the season, from a perspective of preparation, I do think that it's... I don't mind. I don't mind playing a Newcastle. I don't mind playing a Spurs, you know, despite the fiery nature involved with those fixtures.
Yeah, and the one thing that I do like about it is we have to be serious. Like I said, like you can't... You
switches you on, doesn't it? It, like, immediately, you know, you're playing Newcastle. we've got to be on it. At the very least, we've got to hit a baseline. Yes,
to
both
protect
of us,
yourself at the very least.
Exactly. Yes, Newcastle are not going to be firing at their best. Arsenal are not going to be firing at their best because it'll be our third game if we include Watford. Third game in pre-season. It's still, I think when you get to the Emirates Cup games, that's when you'll start to see players really sharpen up. But again, it just makes you more alert for sure because you've got that type of game right in front of you in a big crowd as well. So
absolutely. I mean, you talked about Zubamendi there. Leading into it, are there any particular players that maybe beyond?
This is our little thing, George. This is our little thing in the same way. Alex isn't gonna have a clue why we're laughing when we just transition.
Oh my goodness! But yes, I mean, is there a player that you're looking forward to see? I mean, look, there's a lot of interesting talent that is coming back from injuries. Right? Like factually, like one of the things that we're talking about is that injuries were a major part of our description last season. Yeah, and there's a lot of players coming back with scars. How do those scars show up in the game? There's a lot of players that are coming back with a point to prove. Big players, by the way. That have to come back after some poor season, and then you're looking at, in addition, you talk about the new signings and people that we're going to rediscover. I mean, even people like Ethan and new players like Max Dowman, who have come on tour. Like, this is the one thing I love about preseason. You can be completely, not even just optimistic, but just open to completely new potential. And I love that. That is where I get the most joy. I love doing these pods the most because I get to think, okay, what can we do to change? How can we make ourselves look different? So in that vein, who are you most excited to see potentially? And let's maybe break it down because I want to break it up a little bit in terms of this section. Let's remove all the youth, which, may include Miles and Ethan, but also the youth players that you had. Let's remove that. We actually, by the way, did record a youth pod, so that will be coming up to your ears very, very soon. But let's try to see just the playing staff, the ones that we know. Who are you most excited to see?
I think we could do quite a few here. We could go back and forth because I think there's a lot of players, that for me intrigue me, excite me, but also, as you alluded to, have big seasons. In terms of excitement, I mentioned it in the TCP Live, and I'll talk about it again. I'm really, really excited to see Riccardo Calafiori. I think that boy is due an explosion if he is able to maintain continuity with fitness. For me, that is the only thing preventing Calafiori from being able to impact the team. Because the ability, the talent, when we're talking about sheer ingenuity across the back line, I'd say Calafiori has the most level of ingenuity and the ability to be unpredictable in a strong and positive way out of anyone else amongst our backline. And that is really high praise when we talk about some of the players that we have there, your Salibas. And I just think that, when we talk about change, we talk about left-hand side dynamics. The games that Calafiori played in last season, I'd argue, are best performances through our left-hand side. And we'll probably get into the tactical details a little bit later. Calafiori was featuring, and it was because of the impact that he provides in the final third. It's the responsibility he takes on the ball. And I'm just really excited by the idea of seeing him at left centre-back more than left-back right now, because I think that's the potential there. In terms of explosion, I think Calafiori is at his best there. Both from an in-possession point of view, gives him more responsibility, but also out of possession, when we're talking about defensively, what's Calafiori really strong at is the aerial capacity, it's the ability to be aggressive centrally. We saw it in that cameo against Newcastle where he had to come on, and Newcastle did absolutely nothing in that second half at the Emirates. So, I'm really excited about Calafiori. That's someone that I've got a lot of stocks in, George. I think invest in stocks in Calafiori because the talent is undeniable. Even last season, you saw the glimpses of when Arsenal were in moments of adversity. We talk about the Man City game at the Etihad. Who comes up clutch? It's Calafiori to get us back into the game. And that shifted the entire momentum of the game. And then you think of Wolves away, the red card to Miles. Who steps up and gets the all-important winner? It's Calafiori. So, very excited to see.
He's got a knack for changing points, on the board. Yeah. And he has got starting level quality, undeniably. And I think the biggest thing that I'm really interested with him, I probably wanted to ask your take on it. Okay, so we know he brings ingenuity. We know the talent's crazy. We know that we may both slightly see his future at left center back when potentially Gabriel has moved on. And we know these things, but in the current version of Arsenal, where do you think, say fitness is not a concern, and that's the same with Miles, and we're assuming Zubamendi's in, and we're assuming all these changes.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there is enough in the Calafiori game model that we haven't seen that we may see a little bit different? What do you make of him kind of in the solution to providing the overlap? Is that something that people, like, we've all wanted one, including me on this pod quite a bit. Have we overlooked his potential to operate as a dynamic width holder? Or do you see a lot of his ingenuity as kind of more isolated on the underlap, in affecting play centrally, in driving inside and then laying off? Is there potential for you, in your opinion, to see Calafiori? Yes, he can start there, but also he can equally provide dynamic width on the outside. He
100%.
can equally overlap and provide a threat, as we saw against PSG with the Saka
That's what I was just going to
in terms
refer
of a
to.
brilliant, in terms of a brilliant final ball.
Yeah.
Do you think that we are missing a trick in terms of, at least seeing that as a potential option?
For me, like, Big Gabby is elite. The partnership that he has with Saliba is the best partnership that I've seen at Arsenal, hands down, in terms of like qualities of the individuals and how they work as a pairing. And you consider the modern game and the demands for centre-backs, it's ridiculous, and we are very blessed to have that. So with that comes a level of minutes that Calafiori is going to need elsewhere, and so far that has been at left-back. And for me, I've never been of the idea that, whether it's at right-back or left-back, they need to just be an out-and-out width holder, running the channel, providing width. It's about the situational runs and the timing. And you saw that in the PSG game, where he comes on and he makes the impact. He makes something happen. And unfortunately, Bukayo isn't able to convert in that specific moment. And I think Calafiori can absolutely do that. For me, what Calafiori is when we're talking about versatility, but quality across different areas of the pitch, I would say he's probably one of our best in that regard, in terms of what he can offer. We've seen it, the runs, not just on the underlap, but the centre-forward type runs that Calafiori has made as well, to get in behind and to score goals. We saw it against PSV. I just think this is a player in which, like I said, our best performances, when we were looking at our left-hand side from an attacking perspective, I think Calafiori was massive there in terms of the fluidity, the interchanges, and the rotations. And I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on Arsenal's team becoming very free, not just in midfield, but also in the forward areas with someone like a Calafiori who can give you that impact. And that's the way I see it. I think he can give you that dynamic level of quality on the overlap, but I think, he's someone who is not just going to give you that. He's going to give you so much in a variety of different areas of the pitch. And that's what makes you so much more difficult to defend against.
I think what I really like, Calafiori is an example of somebody that attacks space.
Yeah.
And it's not even just having to be central. Like, you see the fluidity, and his mind is very, let me go to where I'm needed, and then let me follow the ball. Like, he's incredibly Wenger coded in a sense of like his understanding of the pitch and of the game is at a different level. And I'm really excited because I don't think we got to see that as, like, we saw it in moments. And, look, man, like, I'm all for understanding how new signings might impact the team and the new tactics of it all. But I do think sometimes we have a look at what we've got at home and something that we haven't seen.
Yeah.
And we don't see the potential about what that could be. I mean, sure, maybe it's picking data, but you look at what Calafiori was able to do against Leicester, your favorite club, and the impact that has on Martinelli and his type of game, and then the impact that knock-on will have for other players in the 11. And then you start to add the Gyökeres, who likes to move as well, and you start to add the Eberechi Eze within that left-hand side, and you're starting to think that's a really dynamic, intelligent side that's capable of interchange, that we've just focused on the right for very long. Yeah, exactly. And it's not just the right-hand side, because there is a player on the right that we haven't seen. There is a player that has been incredibly important to us that also, like Calafiori, has suffered through injury.
I know where you're going.
His name is Benjamin White. And Mate, there are two things that all rivals have done this summer off, in my opinion. Everybody has recruited central running power, especially through a creative midfielder. Xavi Simons now linked to Chelsea. Shirky at City. Florian Wirtz at Liverpool. Arsenal looking at Ebriche Eze. The attacking midfielder position, and especially with a running output attacking midfielder, has been a key crux to every single major team in the Premier League. I don't think that is by chance, personally. Now, you also have a look. The other positional change, by the way, people are all changing strikers, but I don't think that necessarily informs a tactical difference. Everyone's looking for a striker and a reference center forward, and that's going to be used in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
However, even United, I mean, for God's sakes, they're getting Mbeumo and Cunha. So like the attacking, the ability to run through the center of the pitch is
Jackson
definitely
as well,
something.
George. You're looking at Jackson, you're talking about a channel runner. Exactly.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Another one.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that I think a lot of people have been looking at is this idea of some width on the outside. I mean, Arsenal have looked on the right with Nani Madueke. We've talked about that touchline quality. Chelsea looking at Giddens. You're looking at a lot of the Rodrigo with the links to Liverpool and us as well. You're looking at, Liverpool have recruited Frimpong. They've recruited Kirkes. City have yet to been able to do it, but they wanted Livramento. They wanted Cambiasso. There is a push towards this overlapping fullback need. And I think we've talked about it on the pod before, but I am looking back on it, and Ben is our best overlapper in the squad, hands down. Even with the excitement that I have with Calafiori, and not having him as a factor, as a way to change games even. Forgetting the debates, because people start doing the starting 11 debate, and I don't want to get into it. It's about the way that you can change your team. If things aren't working, and I'm looking at a squad that we've all said, we as Arsenal fans, if you've watched last season, you can tell when the game is drawn that we won't win. There's a moment that you all get that feeling. Well, how do you change that potency? By having a little bit of a different intent, by having, us trigger and do different movements. And that includes with overlapping width. That includes having a little bit more dynamic width in addition to some more central running power. And Ben's a big part of that for me. I mean, the fact that maybe Arsenal haven't looked to recruit that in the market is because we have our overlapping options that have just been injured. And it's just more of a case of now we need to see them play for Arsenal again. And Ben was a very significant part of our ability to break down not just low blocks, but stubborn blocks. Like the idea that, we're basically really highlighting players, really, that can just make our forwards come inside more. Yeah. That's really what the fancy way of this is saying. And we're trying to find ways that we can do that, whether that's through an Eze, a Gyökeres overlap, whether that's through Calafiori, but they're all just fancy ways of saying, how can I change my team so then ultimately, when we have 5 players in attack, the people on the outermost layer, the touchline options, aren't always our most threatening attackers. That, for me, I think, is the key in finding solutions that employ that a little bit more so that we can see those changes a bit more. And I think that Ben has got a lot to give, mate. Like I was seeing when he came back, and I'm with you. I don't see a physical drop-off. What I saw was a sharpness drop-off, which makes sense. He didn't play. So I'm really excited that he's got a full preseason. I'm excited to see that, he's been able to get over his injuries. And I'm really excited to see that position, because I think that position is probably the most clearest example of rotation that we will have in the entire squad. We don't have a position that is as deep as right back, in my opinion,
Great.
as far as quality goes. So Timber and White, very different fullbacks, but of quality of the highest order. We're talking 50 million plus pound assets here in both of them. So the kind of demand for Mikel to rotate, I think, is going to be most prevalent at right back.
Absolutely. Yeah. And do you know what it is as well, George? And I want to throw this back to you. And I think for me, it's kind of like, when we look at Ben, we look at Timber, we've said it many times, viewers of this podcast have seen us speak about this. The beauty of the two is the qualities that they have of the highest order. they both have their weaknesses. They're very prevalent. You know, we know what Ben struggles with in terms of the 1v1s in isolation, defending wide. You know, you're always, I know certainly from my perspective, there's a significant level of apprehension there when I see him facing these situations. But then the same with Timber in terms of some of the final third play that he's still learning, that he still needs to improve on, especially on the outside of the width. I think he can do better. But I guess the question is like, so how do we kind of navigate and manage those two going into the season between different games? Would you say it's kind of like changing depending on the opposition? And I think for me, there's an interesting Gabriel Heinze conversation here as well, where I think there was a question on X that kind of wanted us to go a little bit into it, and that's where I wanted to bring this conversation to this specific scenario, where one of the things about Gabriel Heinze that I've read about, and again, you know, we're limited to the amount of information that we have on him, and I can tell you for a fact I've not watched a single game that Gabriel Heinze has coached. But one of the things that people who have watched him, who have done their research, has mentioned that he's someone who likes to be very pragmatic in the sense of, depending on what battles there are between different games, he selects the most appropriate player to face that battle, to give him the best opportunity to win that battle, whether it's a 1v1 defensively or whether it's final third play in a specific scenario, a specific sequence. Do you think that could be applied here with Timber and White, depending on the type of game that they face?
I'll go even further in the same game. Like if we're looking at, you know, there's different phases to a Newcastle game. There's different phases to protecting a lead, to gaining a lead. And I feel that his quotes on how he views opposition so technically and so specifically is going to mean that there's going to be a more proactive approach to rotation. And one thing also is movement. He is incredibly big on movement in the final third. He's incredibly big, by the way, on having his most dangerous attackers high up the pitch so they don't have to do the running. That was actually one of the best quotes that I heard about him. So this idea that he is going to be somebody who's going to argue for our players to get more freedom, our most dangerous attackers. What does that mean though? That means, finding different ways of having them not on the outside, right? So I mean, from that perspective, not only do I think it's going to change between opponent, I think it's going to change within the same game. And the team that's going to start the match is not guaranteed to end the match. And us having that kind of level quality is going to be huge. There's a couple players. I mean, we can make a whole pod on this, to be honest with you.
Let's
because
do
there's
one
so
more
many
each,
players.
maybe. One more each.
Yeah. Let's do one more. Okay, I'm going to say this because actually you have always been a little bit higher on Kai Havertz than I have. Yeah. I'd say in general.
I think you're really intrigued, aren't you? I can tell,
very intrigued, because I have not seen Kai Havertz this filled out since his Leverkusen days, pre-growth spurt, where I looked at him and I said, your body makes sense.
Yeah.
Then the growth spurt happened, and we all know the inconsistencies. Fact of the matter is, I can't deny the output potential in terms of what he did with Arsenal. In terms of the minutes he's done, he has fully been able to provide the output while still not filling me with confidence. He's a killer. Like, I think those two have existed at the same time for me. Like, I have watched him and said, I think he's a great player. I just don't think his wage has ever been representative of his impact on the pitch. Like, Saka, for me, is what that wage demands and earns and should earn. However, Kai Havertz has been, whether you want to say he looks awkward, he's not the greatest player in the world, he's been effective, and you cannot deny that. Now, this is the first time that I have seen him and I go, no, that fits. Like, the way you've grown and now you've filled out, your body looks coordinated, and I haven't even seen you play yet, and that's what I'm most excited about. I am most excited to see how this change in his physique is going to translate to change on the pitch, because I think this is a very intelligent footballer whose faults, by the way, came from a lack of coordination and balance, fundamentally. When I find that he fluffs a chance, and I find that he really frustrates me in the box from not being, that much of a killer, there's aggression that is lacking. However, really it's about balance and coordination. He gets under himself and he doesn't finish with composure. There's times in which he, even in completing a pass, it's a little bit lazy, even though he's done the brilliant work to run out wide, create the space for himself, and then the execution of it isn't always fully there. I'm very intrigued to see whether or not this changed physique has resulted in a different level in endurance in the carry, because he's always been a runner, a floater, always done that. Now, has this new physique given him the power to be able to still carry energy after he's made the big run? That to me is the biggest thing, because if he solves that, there's a problem. And if he's able to now hold off people more, he always was an annoyance, I would say. I don't think he was ever Giroud in terms of his ability to pin center backs, even last year. But he could pin people. That was undoubted. I mean, the work he did on Konate, the work he did with City consistently, he is somebody that makes annoyance. It's just, I never feel like I'm confident in Kai Havertz dominating every center back all the time. I feel he'll annoy them and he'll be a handful, and there'll be clunky moments in which he competes and there's a knockdown and he creates something because there's chaos there, and he's a very, he is a big player naturally, and he's got some of that aggression, more than I thought, by the way. I think since he's come to Arsenal, he's developed an even nastier side. Like before, he was physical by nature of being 6'4", but he never used it. And at Arsenal, there has been a bit more nastiness about
especially that him. Do you remember that Newcastle game, George? It was in
I was
his
just going to say
season.
that.
The challenge on who was it? I think it was. I
forget who he did, but it was off the sideline, right?
Yeah.
He just came flying in.
Yeah.
And got up, dusted himself off, went off, and he's like, no, I wanted to do that. There was intent behind that. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Not shy, Havertz.
I don't mind that. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. But then I didn't see it. Like, I only saw it when he got really riled up, and it was never consistent. Now I'm thinking.
Give me your prediction,
You got
George.
a beard.
Let's
you got a beard.
He's got a beard. I've seen beard
You got a beard now. You got a beard now. You're a little bit bigger now. You're crossing your arms and you're showing a bit of presence about you. Do you have that ability to now stand up and kind of? I do think that could. And by the way, he has a big season. People I don't think are talking about this. He's going to run into the last 2 years of his contract, and he's on the highest wage at Arsenal right now. I'm assuming Saka will go beyond that, but he is the highest wage earner right now, and
it's a big season for Kai. Yeah. I think
it's a big season. New striker coming in, regardless of how I feel that Gyökeres may have limitations. The club has basically laid the gauntlet. Like, oh no, we're supporting you, but like, we're buying you competition. You've got to perform because, for God's sakes, even have a look at our captain. We're going to bring competition for him. No one is safe here. So you've got to perform. And look, anyways, that was a great monologue to say, I have a sneaky suspicion he's going to surprise people. I don't know.
Let me throw you on a prediction now, right? Let's go for it. So, Kai Havertz. Oh God. Kai Havertz, please.
Oh God. Here we go.
Let's see. I'll give you mine as well. Let's say he plays 30 Premier League games, right? Let's say around 26 starts. How many goals in the Premier League do you reckon he gets?
Mate, anywhere from 16 to 20. And I probably bet 17, 18.
Yeah.
If he plays that amount of games.
This is the thing, George. I think
this is coming from a guy who doesn't believe he's a killer. Like, I don't have trust in that. But mate, like, I don't know. I think this extra physical thing could really go in his favor. This is a really harsh, but he has almost bumbled his way, in my opinion, to the certain output. He has done some brilliant things in which he has gotten consistent output even in that January period. He did. You can't deny. He was consistent, right? But mate, some of those for me were like, he still was missing glaring chances. He was like, in key moments, would frustrate the hell. How did you miss that? And there was just that aggression in the box that I was looking for. And look, it could be, so he gained a little bit of muscle, now he's aggressive kind of thing. But I'm just interested to see whether or not this physique results in change in balance and coordination. Because if it does, it opens a whole new dimension that has plagued Kai his entire career since his growth spurt.
Yep. And speaking of players who have a lot to prove, that brings me to my player. That I'm intrigued about is Martin Ødegaard. And I think with Ødegaard, again, it's another player who's got a massive season ahead. And I think a lot of Arsenal fans will see him as a player who so far has came to Arsenal has been fantastic. I'd say, in terms of the consistency that he has given. But there is one season in which he has, I'd say, taken a step back. I think if we're being honest about the footballing perspective, and I think, players can have a off season, and I think you have to give them sometimes that grace for sure. But you can't have 2 off seasons in a row, especially with the role and responsibility that Martin Ødegaard has. But my prediction is that I think he'll have a solid season. I think he'll do really well because I think we're going to be surrounding him with more movement. And I think Martin Ødegaard at his best is when he's got players in and around him who are moving. If you think of, we always talk about it, the right-hand side, the Saka-Ben White partnership, Ødegaard thrived. You think of the 22-23 season, what Martin Ødegaard offered in terms of the passes towards the left-hand side as well, to Martinelli, he thrived. It was the movement and the fluidity around him that really allowed him to dictate. When the game was very static, and Arsenal were quite static as well, ahead, with Ødegaard there behind the ball, I think when the game becomes of that nature, you need sheer qualitative superiority. Players who are just going to be able to do something and make it happen, whether it's a shot on goal, whether it's putting something right on a plate that Bukayo Saka does. I don't think Martin Ødegaard is that type of player to give you that consistently. I think Martin Ødegaard needs players around him who are going to be free, who are going to move, in which he can then pick out. And I think he is going to have a solid season, and I'm intrigued by what he can do in pre-season. So I think again, when we talk about how many years will Ødegaard have left after this year, I think maybe 2 or
he signed a bigger contract though.
Yeah,
I think
but I do think being the skipper, and again when we're talking about players that we're looking to bring in, when you've got Ethan coming through, you've got Eze as well, the links there. I think it's going to be a very intriguing and interesting season for Ødegaard. But I'm low-key excited because of some of the deals that we've done.
Yeah, he's probably... Okay, for as much as ignoring your opinion on the player with Martin Ødegaard, the one thing that I am excited about, we always felt that he was immovable. And I think every fan at some point was frustrated. Whether or not you love the player and you think that he's absolutely phenomenal, or that you think he has stuff to improve and maybe he's a great squad option, and or whether you want to send him to Siberia like certain X accounts, like wherever you are on that spectrum, the one thing that I think people can agree on though is, why was he guaranteed a spot even when he was poor? Like every player in the starting 11, that was the only one we did not rotate categorically. You can't say that now. Our most exciting youth is coming on tour in that position in Max Dowman. That one of our biggest breakout stars, who, by the way, it looks like he's got another physical change in Ethan, is highly touted, who has just signed a new contract with the promise of more central roles. You add an Eberechi Eze on top of that, mate. Yeah. For as much as there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure there, even if he was in tip-top form. I think the one thing that I'm really happy about is the club haven't rested on their laurels, then Mikel hasn't. For as much as I felt like he has unfairly at times stood by consistently playing him no matter what, he has bought with the intent to challenge. Now, whether he does or he doesn't, that's going to wait to be seen, and we're going to wait to critique or not during the season. But at the very least, he has shown intent to challenge some of the biggest positions and what people may have described as his favorites. I look at Kai, another potential favorite. He's buying another striker. Whether I believe he's, incredible or nothing, regardless, it's competition.
And just to add there as well, George, just to add there quickly on your point about Kai, we know Kai's a massive favourite of Mikel, and I've mentioned how much I like Kai as well, but you're bringing in a Victor Gyökeres, but also Martin Zubimendi as well. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, Kai Havertz is just going to play midfielder, but there's only 11 spots in the team, right? And there's I think there's some change here, And I like that. There's a lot of pressure on specific players to perform now. So, yeah, continue with your point. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's just, my big point was I see more potential where, regardless of your opinion on certain players, whether you're supporting them or even the targets that we're getting, he's bought things that question what we did last year. That's undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Now, if we see some more square pegs and round holes, then we're going to have different conversations here. But every move he's made is with the intent to change. And that intent to change could look very different, not just in players, but in how we get set up. So in terms of our tactics, in terms of what you're hoping to see moving forward,
we can't beat this guy.
give me your most anticipated. Okay, this just becomes Football Manager in a way, because people just start throwing out numbers, like every prime number and starting to the prime factor of like 6, and they start going down that way. Let's talk about maybe like intent. So we've seen a lot in previous seasons. What do you think is something we haven't seen that we could see moving a little bit, into next season?
Very interesting, because as viewers know, I've done it many times about the tactical trends and the changes in Arsenal's cycle that we've seen over the years, and pre-season have given us glimpses as well. 22-23, you talk about the back three with Ben White being that right centre-back wide of a three, and then Zinchenko coming inside. Nominally that being our structure. And you saw that straight away in pretty much every single game for the first 19 or so fixtures. Teams started to adapt and we had to make some changes, but pre-season set the precedent that allowed Arsenal to really use those ideas and those intentions into the season. And also the press. The press elevated massively in that 22-23 season with the inclusion of Saliba coming at the back. And then Jesus being regarded by Pep Guardiola, in his own words, as the best pressing forward in world football. And then the following season, I felt in pre-season, we saw change in our press, being a lot more flexible, and to give us, I'd say, a more sustained effort throughout the entirety of the season. There were changes there, but also in build-up, the flexibility in how we were moving. And I felt last season it was difficult to really gauge what the idea was because of the injuries that we suffered. But this season, this pre-season, we're guessing here, right? Ultimately, but for me, what I'd really like to see, George, and I mentioned it on X, is more out-to-win runs from our wingers. I think that is something that is one of the most dangerous aspects of football when we're talking about the front line. You think of the peak Liverpool team, for example, the Salah, the Manes, the out-to-win diagonal runs. It causes havoc. Go back to last season, you think of the Bukayo Saka goal against Liverpool, the Ben White clip ball over the top. The run that Saka makes, look at Robertson and his body positioning. He's basically facing the touchline because he's anticipating that ball to go straight down the channel in behind, and it becomes a lot more easier for Robertson to defend because he's shaped his body in the correct way immediately. But once you make that out to win run, the fullback then has to shift, turn, and whilst he's doing that, the winger already knows that ball is going over the top in Saka in that moment. So he's already got that dynamic advantage. And then when Saka gets onto the ball, Robertson manages to recover, but he's unbalanced because of what he's had to do to get there, and Saka scores. We think of Liverpool away from home in Anfield, the runs that Martinelli was making. Go and look at Conor Bradley's positioning in that game and how he was struggling to cope with that movement, but we weren't picking him out. There is opportunities to make these runs. I'm thinking of a Noni Madueke as well, right? And this idea of Noni Madueke, not just from the right, but from the left. Why are people feeling there's potential with Noni Madueke through the left? One of the reasons is the movement that he makes in between the fullback and the centre-back channel. The space is always there in every single game, pretty much. I feel like with Zubimendi as well, the intention's there, the ball over the top. I really want to see us put more emphasis there because I think it's going to give us more opportunities for our wingers to become even more threatening in front of goal. And that's something I do really want to see.
Yeah, I hear that. And, I think that it could be filled by other things. Like, that's why we talked at the start of the pod with the whole Calafiori and the Ben White impact, like this idea that they can start wide. But if we're going to have a rotation in which they're going to arrive in dynamic width, it allows the out-to-in run to have even more threatening effect, right? Yeah. And, I think we'll see that. One thing that I do think we might see is, in general, a lot of third-man runs. There's been this trend in the Premier League lately that I've seen, at least. Some of the best success has been runs off the blind side in midfield from teams. I don't know, have a look at Morgan Rogers in the way that Villa gets used. I mean, he's got excellent running power, so I mean, it's a little bit of an OP version of this. But that theory of running off, and I think in recruiting Florian Wirtz, by the way, they really want to add that Liverpool in their midfield. Like, what their midfield lacked has been a little bit of that physical third man running. And he's going to offer that. Yes, he'll play in the pockets, but his ability to run from deep to create a little bit more space is going to be really key. I look at, Manchester City again. Raniers is going to be phenomenal at that for them. And I look at Arsenal, and I think that Declan Rice is going to have a lot of functional capacity here. I think that, with Zubimendi and somebody behind him, he's got an opportunity. I think Miles, if he gets a chance to play in midfield, has huge opportunity to carry a little bit more threat like this. So I think the idea that we can maybe work the ball out wide or work the ball to a particular angle, and then from the far side, this third man run, not just holding width, but I mean the central late third man run to attract pressure, could be something that we see a little bit more of just in general, I think, with Arsenal. And lastly, I think when I'm trying to think in terms of us gaining a lead, we have been very okay with sitting into a block. Mate, I think with like the flexibility of our defense, we're going to have some nasty 3-5-2 set up with Gyökeres on the counter, in my opinion. I think we're going to see a lot more of a willingness to... Do you remember when we had the red card against Liverpool? I think it was 2 seasons ago, and we had Ben White that came on, and we just crunched out that game.
In
and
the
everyone
Carabao
was
Cup.
like, yes. And it was brilliant. I think we might see a return to like being okay to just employ that. I mean, think about it. You've got Mascara, who now can join to become a third center back in a 3. That you've got Gabriel Saliba, Mascara.
Yeah.
You add your Calafioris and your Ben Whites. You can even have Timber out wide. Like, what does that do just mentally as far as trying to break? And it wasn't just... We saw it really when we went down to 10 men. We did it against City last year, and we didn't quite hold out, but that willingness to completely sit in and suffocate and suffer, I think we take an even more tactical change where we don't need to wait till 10 men to go down. I think we've now recruited enough like
a lot of
talent.
pace, haven't we, as well? A lot of pace from
Ton of
Madueke
pace.
as well.
Think about it, because like you can now save Saka and make Saka and Gyökeres as the outlets up top. You can throw in freaking Kai Havertz, by the way, up top with Gyökeres as 2 running outlets, and you have these wing backs and everybody sat in. You have Norgard now that you can add to the Zubimendi and Declan Rice in the middle of the park to even shore it up even more. Like, you've got a lot of ways to turn into a back 3 team that is super nasty as a block, that is almost impenetrable. And that excites me, because we've shown that when we do have a lead, look, some people get annoyed. Mikel is very happy to sit. And he not just sit, but I think it's in order to save legs, mate. Like, look, there's a time to go and stretch, but I do think that with all of these changes, we have recruited an insane amount of talent that gives us flexibility to not just have a back 3, but a wing back system with a front 2 striker option. And, you look at your Ezes, by the way. Say we were to get, you have your Gyökeres, but you have your Eze, you have Saka. Now you have Nani as your wing back, your defensive wing back. You've got Calafiori as a defensive wing back. You can throw Timber in the middle with Declan Rice in the 2. Mascara, Gabriel, Saliba.
Mascara, Gabriel, Saliba, in terms of your back 3, right? That's...
Come on.
Yeah.
You want to have Miles in there too? Like, it's gross. Yeah. It's a disgusting... Add Norgard, for God's sakes, even if you want it inside there. Norgard and Declan Rice in the 2. Calafiori out wide on the left, or Miles, whatever you want. Okay? Yeah. On the right, you've got Nani. Then you've got the back 3 that I just listed. And then you've got Eze, Gyökeres, and Saka in transition. Like, frightening. Yeah, exactly. And I think that there might be a little bit more of a willingness to 3-5-2 that we didn't quite do last year. I did want to ask you, when we're chasing a game. Yeah. So that was like when we're ahead in terms of what I think like a tactical switch could do. Far too often, not even chasing, say we're drawn. What do you think is going to be the best or like the next favorite iteration I know it's going to change depending on opponent, yada yada. Is there remember how we did the 3-3-4 at one point?
I was gonna allude to that.
Does that come back, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even go back to 22-23 season when we talk about some of those games that we came back from. Fulham at home. What was the change? It was Eddie Nketiah coming on, and we played with two strikers to pin the centre-backs. Against a back four team, you've got two strikers. Pinning the centre-backs means it's not 2v1 for the centre-backs against your centre-forward, it's 2v2. And I think you could do that with Gyökeres and Havertz as a pair, but also you could switch to a diamond as well, and you could overload with 6 players across the front line, which we do tend to do against back 5 teams as well. I just think for me, there's loads of ways that you can go with this, with the types of traits that we've recruited. When you talk about, Noni Madueke about making runs on the back post through the left-hand side, or Noni Madueke through the right-hand side, giving you a different option with Saka coming inside, and that kind of partnership that you'd have there as well. So ultimately, I think that for me, there's no reason for Mikel to be circumspect in these scenarios. There is so many opportunities for you to change the game because you've got players with different traits and characteristics. And I think that's something, how many times we've said it with our backline. What is the beauty of our backline? It's because we've got players who are not only elite level, but they're different. They're different to each other in certain things. We haven't necessarily had that across the forward areas. And whatever you think about Gyökeres or Madueke, and then you throw an Eze in there as well, let's say, these are players who add things that this team has not had enough of previously. So a very simple assessment of this is it's going to pose more question marks for the opposition, and it's then down on the manager and the coach to be able to manage that. Because I don't know if you've seen George, and I'm kind of going with a different angle here, is Mikel in his, I don't know if you've caught his press conference just before on Haters TV, and he spoke about how we're still short on numbers, which is very interesting, right? I think there's a lot of apprehension here from Mikel's perspective of what's happened previously, because from a numbers perspective, right, let's go through it. So I'd say Mascara is one up on Tomiyasu because Tomiyasu has just not played, right? So that's an additional body there when we consider that scenario.
Can I ask you just really quickly, because I know where you're going with it, but I think this is what people are going to ask. Correct. I know exactly where you're going with the total numbers argument. Do you think, though, Mikel isn't seeing it that way? Where it's like a playing option is completely different to the squad option? So, yes, we had Tomiyasu, but he wasn't played. Like, do you feel that Mikel has been scarred to the point of, even though the number of the squad total was still 21, and it will still be 21, he doesn't consider that. He considered it 20. Yeah, with Tomiyasu.
Yeah. I think it's like that.
And that's the case with a lot of injuries, like Jesus. Is he consistently, is he done? Like the whole idea of Gyökeres implies he is done relying on him even as an option.
Yeah.
Right? Like to recruit another striker like that and to make Jesus third choice behind Kai is a big statement. You know what I mean? Like
especially on the wages that he's on.
Huge on the wages that he's on. And that even Noni Madueke, I'm sorry, Ethan, I will give you central minutes. I'm no longer going to rework my right-hand side to make it work. Screw it. I'm getting dedicated Saka backup.
Yeah. Not
trying to rework it. No excuses. Ødegaard is one in, one out. Zubimendi changes things. But a lot of our business, Neto, I don't want a situation where you almost got us out of the cup again. No, screw it. I want a number 1 keeper in the Premier League to be my number 2 because I want to go hard in the cups. Like, again, the numbers are the same. Neto and Kepa is not one more. We're still talking 21, but do you feel maybe he's seen it as 18 regardless, and he's just gone the other way?
I think so. I think that's exactly what I was going to allude to. But I find it also interesting in how he's still saying we're short, So I feel there's still, because I would say right now, okay, when we look at the squad, I don't think we are short. I don't believe that as of today when we talk about the players that are still there that we will be looking to sell. I'm thinking of Trossard and Martinelli. Whatever your opinions are of that specific pair, one of them needs to go. Certainly in my opinion, and I believe that should be Trossard. But with these players still here, and he's saying we're still short, but maybe it's kind of a feeling in his mind where right now these are the players that we have, but this is not how it is going to be at the end of the window, and he's thinking about it from that perspective of like, okay, without him, do I have enough this season going into it to mitigate the problems that we had last season? And I totally understand that perspective, but with that comes accountability as well, doesn't it, George? Where, okay, you've got your depth now, you've got your players, you've got like Noni Madueke. Let's forget about the deal and some people would argue lack of frugality to it, whatnot. Let's forget about that and just look at the player. As a Saka backup, and let's say that is your perspective on Noni Madueke. As a Saka backup, that is an incredible option as a backup if you just have it from that lens. Martin Ødegaard, Ethan Nwaneri, then you've got an Eberechi Eze as well, the potential arrival there. You think of, the back line. He's been talking about Saliba backup time and time again. He mentioned it in pre-season last year about the number of minutes that Saliba has played. You've got that now. Yes, he's a diamond in the rough of Mascara, but there's absolutely a way in which he can impact proceedings right now. This is a player who is, I think, racked up the most minutes under 21 in Europe. There's no excuses in that sense, is there? So I think this is very interesting, in terms of how it can change.
Just as like a real simple exercise then, right? Kepa for Neto, 1 in, 1 out.
Yeah.
Ødegaard for Jorginho, 1 in, 1 out.
And also Zubamendi for Partey, 1 in, 1 out.
I was just going to say, Zubamendi for Partey, 1 in, 1 out. Madueke, Sterling, 1 in, 1 out.
No. Yeah.
Mascara, Tomiyasu. Kieran Tierney, gone.
Yeah.
Who did play minutes at left wing, which is why we wanted Nani a little bit in moments, right? Like, we use that option. 1 in, 1 out with Tommy, with Mascara. Exactly. Gyökeres, ironically, because we haven't had an attacker leave beyond Sterling, right, would represent the first one.
But you could also argue Jesus, George, couldn't you? You could potentially argue Jesus.
Of course
Jesus.
You could.
Yeah.
Of course you could argue Jesus. And he's not in there. So I think that's what he's looking at about numbers being short.
Yeah, I think so.
He was like, I'm complaining during the season that you didn't get me people. And people have left, and I've just replaced the ones that have left. That didn't mean back in January I was cool. And it wasn't. It didn't mean that people weren't yelling about people and we needed people back in January. I think that's the mentality that he's got. Look, a lot of this is if, ands, or buts. It's getting to the point where it's now July 21st. At this point in the window, it's my job to kind of wrap this up, and then we'll go to questions. But really quickly, tons of exciting change. Manchester United happens. You're starting 11 as things stand. And I am willing to tell you that Gyökeres will be an Arsenal player. I am willing to give that for you. And he's come during the preseason tour. I don't know about anything else, so I don't want to give you that. What's your starting 11?
Raya, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Miles, Rice, Zubamendi, Ødegaard, Saka, Martinelli, Havertz. Yours?
Interesting.
To begin with.
It's the same. I wonder what Calafiori has.
But this is the thing, George, right? We've said the same.
I wonder what he has.
I know the comments will be like, "Oh, what about Gyökeres? What about Calafiori? You did a segment on Calafiori. It's the start of the season. It's the first game.
And it's without a preseason. I wanted to do that. I wanted to do that just so I can spark some internet hate. I don't know. I think preseason's going to be very enlightening. Yeah. I do think so, actually. I think this is the first time in a long time. And, I'm just going to make this last point. This is kind of the first time that we've done this many players too. We've gone through a rebuild. I know people don't want to hear it. There's a lot of players coming in. There was a lot of players going out. There's been a lot of business. The last time we did this was back with White, Ramsdale, 2021, right? Yeah. And when I look at that was big change, right? In terms of the way that we played. It represented actually the biggest change in our game model since Mikel has been here. I don't know what it's going to be, I have my suspicions on the whole 4-2-4, 3-4-3 thing. I do. I've said that before. I think we see an equally defining moment. Like, I think we will look back on this and say this summer of change was a different renewal in terms of our ideas. And yeah, I'm just excited to see what we do. I do think that there's going to be a lot of questions, which I will transition to, because there are people that are basically saying stuff about the left-hand side. For example, at TM Talks Football says on Twitter, left-hand side dynamics, are we comfortable heading into next season with a Gyökeres than nothing? I'm certainly not. Not really a question, more of a statement. But there's more like kind of questions, I would say, that are related to that whole left-hand side and another signing bit. And Mikel has said that we needed more signings. So I'm going to turn it into a question for you. Do you feel that we do another signing? And then now that we do another signing, what does that look like? Because, I mean, even at Jack Raymond says, Xavi Sivens versus Rodrigo for the left wing option, assuming Eze is a separate target. Like what does the post-Gyökeres signing look like for you? Are you confident it gets done? Do you think it's as like, oh, we need an out, as some other people are saying? Where are you at with the ending of the business?
You know me, I've always felt like sales are very important, and I don't like the idea of just hoarding attacking players for the sake of it, despite... I think it all goes back to the apprehension and the worries that we had of last season potentially happening again this season and us being decimated with injuries. But I think, again, I don't think it's good to just... dump loads and loads and loads of players in there. So I think a sale needs to happen. But I do think that there will be an addition. And I think it will be an Eze. I don't think it's going to be this out-and-out touchline option in terms of like a width holder, out-and-out stretching the pitch, because I actually do think Madueke is the player who Mikel has recruited for that. Now, whether you agree with it or not is a different conversation. But I think for me, there is more to the Madueke deal than just the Saka backup when I think about it more and watching some of the footage. And Mikel saying, this is one of the most, exciting, like best wide forwards in the Premier League. I found it interesting he specified wide forward, and not just constrained to like right winger. So although I could be reading too much there, but I think an Eze will be coming in. That's my feeling.
Yeah, it's just how bullish he was in the press conference made me think, I don't even think it's dependent on a sale. Like, he will push it. I think the club want a sale to, like, clean the books.
Yeah.
They would want that, undoubtedly, I have this sneaky suspicion that, he was just so bullish in terms of additions, wasn't he? Like, it was we are short. That's not we're one or two away, or we're always in the market to look. We are short is a pretty strong statement, especially off the back of having basically 5 signings done and 1 pretty much done. I think so. I don't know, mate. I think we definitely do the second one. I'm kind of with you in terms of the profile of what it could be and the essay of it all. If I had my choice personally, subjectively, given what's out there now in the state of the market, essay would be my preferred option as
because
well.
I still think
I'm happy with that.
I think both me and you. I still think Martinelli has a lot to give, and I think Madueke and Martinelli as options there. I'm liking that, especially if we can supplement that with the way Victor Gyökeres plays. So, yeah.
Yeah, no. I completely agree. I mean, it kind of leads into a question on Twitter that, we kind of answered a lot of these in terms of, who people feel like the preseason expectations are. What are you excited about? Which players? I know there was a question basically along those lines from Adam JT White. There was, people talking about us to talk about Gabriel Heinze, which we did kind of address in the pods. Do you find anything off, though, about the striker debate? At Chris, who 7718346 says, is Isak now a possibility? Am I reading the smoke signals? It looks like something's happening. Or are we at least waiting to see if it's possible? Do you have any inkling? I mean, I know Alex says on Twitter he might be feeding into delusion. Do you have any doubt at all? Or do you feel
yeah.
Gyökeres, it's done, and this is just games from a president known to play like this, especially like with Pedro Porro and other players. It's in the remit. It will happen. And the quotes that Mikel said yet today, in terms
he's
of
not usually like that as well, is he, George?
Gyökeres.
He keeps things very close to him. I think Victor Gyökeres is a matter of when, not if. And I think with Isak, I always felt like with Champions League football secured, I felt he would stay for another season. And I think Newcastle would price teams out of a move. And maybe there's something in the Saudi talks. I don't know. I found the comments from the agent very interesting, actually, about the Saudi deal. So maybe there's something there. I mean, I just think it would be... I mean, first, what I will say is I think Newcastle are having a bit of a stinker of a window. when you think of Mbeumo that they've missed out on, you think of Guehi. That's not happened yet. Could still happen, but João Pedro, a deal that they missed out on. Ekitike, Liverpool grabbing him. The uncertainty now with Isak potentially. I think they're having a really, really bad window at the moment. I think they've got Elanga, which is a certain exciting player there to bring in through the right hand side, but I don't think Newcastle have had the greatest of windows so far. And
they haven't had their.
Let me put it to you, George. Where do you think Isak will be come the end of the window?
I've always thought there's no way he's leaving.
Yeah.
This summer, personally.
Maybe Saudi, maybe?
It could be on some backward scheme that they loan back to Newcastle. Yeah. That I could see as a possibility. But no, I feel like you've got... First off, it's just the Saudis are too proud. There would be... Yeah, it would ruin, by the way, in my opinion, Saudi investment, period. Like what that would do to their cause and their potential and like future sheiks, by the way, and taking over other clubs. Like the whole premise that they did is because even at City, they came, they conquered, they saw, they did it. Yeah. Like for them to come, promise X, they've had a good progression, but if you can't keep the best striker in the world, how do you sell other people to come in? Yeah, exactly. And that project being, equivalent to City. You just don't, So politically, I thought it was impossible.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So yeah,
I've got a question. I think we've got two questions on Discord actually. One, let's go with the fun one actually. It's from Reg. Say, rank these: lasagna, spaghetti bolognese, pizza, and the pizza being your favorite choice, focaccia, carbonara, and Alfredo.
Wait, say the last three again.
Focaccia, carbonara, and Alfredo. I think focaccia is a type of bread, isn't it?
It is. Okay, I'm gonna like shock people. Focaccia dead last. Like it's bread at the end of the day for me, and it is what it is. The others are like meals, right? So,
mate, a good pizza is elite. A good pizza.
But you know what, mate? Oh God, I'm gonna like cause issues. I think a bolognese slaps. A good bolognese is hearty, filling, but I love me a little bit of cream too. A little bit of
Pause, George.
Oh my God. Oh, good God. I'm never escaping.
Proceed.
I'm never escaping these clips.
Proceed.
I don't know, mate. There's no way to proceed from that. I'd probably go bolognese, Alfredo, pizza, lasagna, carbonara, and then focaccia, I think, is last there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you. You can have your ranking, but for me, like the top has to be pizza. Like a good, although lasagna does slap. Like a good lasagna, and it fills you up as well. Pretty quickly. So,
pizza's the most diverse.
Yeah, exactly. Another question.
Tactically flexible.
Tactically flexible. From Dimitsko. So he's asked a few questions, but I think we've kind of gone through quite a few of them. But I guess we can continue with the Gyökeres theme because that is still on everybody's mind. How big will the signing of Gyökeres be for Ødegaard? Imagine him paired with someone who can run in behind incessantly, and the implications there. What are your thoughts on Ødegaard and the potential partners? You know, we spoke a lot about Martinelli and the runs there, but what about someone like an Ødegaard who we spoke about requiring runs and movement to be at his best?
The more movement you have around Martin and Ødegaard, the better. Yeah. I don't think you can get around that, right? Like, I mean, his one big weakness is the running in transition. Therefore, you have people that run in transition very powerfully who can then still have a shot. He is somebody that can find people with through balls. And by the way, his through ball success rate is a lot better from deep. So like the earlier release from build up to a Gyökeres who loves to run in space with lots of space, it's going to pair well with somebody that does his best through ball work deeper than they do even higher up the pitch. Like, you know, even though he has the most through balls in Europe, I think if you looked at the collection of that, they actually come from deeper than they do in the final third, which helps a Gyökeres because he needs the space to run into. So like when you talk about that run and him being probably the most, not the most athletic, but the most consistent runner in transitions, according to that one chart in Europe right now, like you pair those two things and you can see that it's going to be a positive relationship. Yeah. The one thing that I will say though is I do bring up that Liverpool game with Martinelli, who was making incessant runs at center forward consistently, but the first half was very poor. And the second half was better because he chose, I think this is more on him personally. Like Martin Ødegaard has a big season and I think his success will be completely related down to him more than it will be platforming. I feel that we have platformed Martin Ødegaard brilliantly. His poor form has not come for me because the team hasn't played for him. In fact, I'd say the opposite, in which the team has at times played through him and for him at the expense of others in the team. And so his form is going to be completely individual, in my opinion. And it's not going to be related towards Gyökeres potentially having an overlap on the outside, which will help. Like there's going to be an aspect of that. But again, I look at that Martinelli versus Liverpool game at the end of the season there when he was a center forward, and in that he was a running center forward and the runs were ignored for an entire half, really. And so that's to say, like, you know, this is a guy that is running, that is making the runs, but we're just not playing them. So that's going to be an individual thing for me. And his ability to is going to be dictated by how much time, if Eze comes, if Ethan, we've promised minutes, Nani Madueke, like again, we've made moves that we no longer are just platforming him. We've made moves to platform other people. Yeah. And it's up to him to change the mind and say, no, come back to platforming me. Yeah. And I think that's the transition that he needs to make in a playing sense this season. And that competition is only good for Arsenal, in my opinion.
100%.
How about you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I feel like...
Like, do you think it's like it's as simple as more runs, boom, better Ødegaard? Like, do you have the same concerns that maybe I've had? Is that too much of a one-game sample? Like, do you think, like, last season, just the movement was so bad, and that really contributed to even worse form for Martin Ødegaard?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things, and also potentially just Ødegaard having an off-season. But I think, for me, it's kind of like... I look at not just the movement in front of him, but I think Zubimendi and the partnership that Ødegaard has had with Zubimendi in the past is going to help him as well. You know, having that familiarity there with someone like him. And again, another very intelligent player in build-up. And I think with Martin Ødegaard, I've always thought Martin Ødegaard in the pockets, in terms of receiving and finding space, he's one of the best in the world. He constantly finds himself behind and away from the cover shadow of a marker who's trying to cover him with his back. Martin Ødegaard will be able to move where the space is there, and someone like a Zubimendi who will be able to find him. I think that's a partnership that could work really well. For me, it's just a case of I still feel like last season when we saw at times Ben White and Saka there, I mean, Ipswich away, I mean, obviously Ipswich, very poor side. Martin Ødegaard was fantastic against Ipswich, and I don't think that's just because of the team that it was against. I think it's because of the synergy that he had with those two players there. And I do think, though, with a Victor Gyökeres, and I think with a Madueke as well, I think Madueke, you know, when we're talking about like top-end running power, running speed, he's right up there. And I think, again, that's why I look at Martinelli and Madueke. I think they could really help Ødegaard. But at the end of the day, a lot of this is going to be, as you alluded to, about the player himself and him applying himself consistently. Because as much as, even including myself, we're massive fans of Martin Ødegaard, but if you've had one poor season, I'd go down and say it was poor by his standards, and you follow up with let's say an abject season to follow, people are not going to be happy with it, unfortunately, especially with what we're looking to achieve and where we want to be. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that either way, Arsenal win.
Exactly.
Martin Ødegaard thrives with these signings, becomes an incredibly important player, and ends up replicating his form of a couple years ago. And we end up having one of the best midfields in the league at that point, right? You add the Zubimendis, you add Eze, for God's sakes, and Martin Ødegaard of 2 years ago in terms of how he's performing.
Yeah.
One of the best in the league. Otherwise, we've bought competition, and even if there's performances that we feel that he can do better in, we've now got somebody to come in and change it and do better, and somebody that we do trust. So either way, I think Arsenal win.
Win, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing here. So that was a good pod, man. It's always a good pod with you.
Great.
I love those. I love these little nerd ones, and it's nice to like just think about. We have a lot of content coming. Like I said, I just recorded with Will an entire youth pod that you guys should sink your teeth into. We went through scholars. I don't know if you knew this, Rohan, what a scholar is. Period. Professional contract or whatnot. We just defined what the heck those are. We defined how the heck I have a problem watching these U17s, and who are the U17s that I really like in terms of some of the ones that I've watched. And then even further, we talked a lot about, the youth, and, if you were really trying to see, oh, guys, I wish you talked a little bit about the youth and who was going to perform in the preseasons, we did an entire section on YouTube for all of you guys to go and see who are the youngsters, what are they, what are their profiles, and who we feel is probably the most impactful from an Arsenal sense. So definitely check that out. We've got the instant reaction coming back on Wednesdays. We've got more Scouteds coming, and we've got probably rewatches coming along with Sir Rohan Jivan, throughout the season. So lots of content running your way. Mr. Rohan, thank you so much for all your help as always.
Oh, always a pleasure. Love it. Love you, George.
Amazing. Love you too, buddy. And love you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys like the content, make sure you guys click on the link down below, and you can sign up for a 7-day free trial to check out kind of all the initiatives that we did. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we will be back with another pod very, very soon for your viewing pleasure. Thank you so much. And thanks for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. This was one kind of queue the ladies thoroughly enjoyed.
Electrifying. Inspiration.